Hi guys, my name is Tiffany and welcome back to Upcycle by Tito, where I take old forgotten items and give them a new life. I wanted to start moving away from all the summery outfits that I have been making, and I wanted to just make something which had more of a fall feel. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I turned this blazer into this mini dress. This is a with Wendy inspired upcycle. I'm going to link her video down below if you guys want to check that out. I got this blazer for $2.99 from the Salvation Army, and the moment I saw it, I immediately knew I wanted to turn it into a mini dress, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with the top. When I saw Wendy's video where she recreated this Paris, Georgia top, I just thought it would look super cute as a dress. Oh, also the top I'm wearing right now is also upcycled from a blazer, and I'm going to link that video tutorial down below if you guys want to check that out. But for now, let's move on to this tutorial. You'll need a sewing machine, iron and ironing board, thrifted blazer, scrap fabric, interfacing, a large piece of paper, parchment paper, a ruler, fabric shears, sewing pins, safety pins, an invisible zipper, 1/4 inch bias tape, thread, measuring tape, fabric marker, and a seam ripper. Moving on to the game plan. From the front portion of the blazer, we're going to create a top that looks something like this. Since we won't have very large pieces of fabric to work with, we're going to make the front out of 4 panels and the back out of 4 panels. For the skirt, we'll use the back of the blazer as well as the sleeves to create something that looks like this. Once again, we'll be using 4 panels to create the front of the skirt and then 4 panels to create the back of the skirt. Let's take a look at this blazer. While I'm looking at it right now, it actually doesn't look too horrible on camera, but trust me guys, in real life, it is truly heinous. This blazer features shoulder pads and is fully lined. While I don't like this fabric pattern as a blazer, I'm actually pretty excited about it and I can't wait to turn this into a dress. As I mentioned a little earlier, this is a with Wendy inspired upcycle, and I'm specifically referring to a video she posted about a month ago where she shows 2 methods on how to draft a bodice block. Before I go ahead and seam rip this blazer, I'm actually going to build myself a bodice block from one of those methods. The method that I'm going to be using is from the blog In The Fold, and they have a tutorial on how to draft your own bodice block from just 9 measurements. I'm going to go ahead and give that a try, and if you guys want to go check that out, I'm going to link that post in the description box below. Fingers crossed that it works out, because if it does, then I'm going to draft the pattern for the top part of my dress from this bodice block. Following the directions, I proceeded to measure myself. Measuring my bag proved to be slightly difficult, but not impossible. Then I worked my way through the steps, slowly drawing out the pattern for my bodice block based on my measurements. Once I had my pattern drawn out, I traced it out on some parchment paper and cut it out, making sure to leave seam allowance for the shoulder, back, and side seams. Based on the pattern that I just cut out, I've actually made a mock-up on some cotton fabric that I have. As you can see here, this is the back center seam. Normally you would have that open so you could put it on and somebody can pin it on you, but because I'm alone, I've actually left the side seam partially undone so that I can slip it on. I've gone ahead and safety pinned this side seam shut so that I can make any necessary adjustments. And the one thing that jumps out to me right away as a problem is that these darts come up way too high. So they should sit about here. So they are about 2 to 3 inches higher than I want them to be. Other than these darts being too high, I am so shocked at how well this fits me. It's laying completely flat on the top, and it fits me pretty nicely all the way around. The armholes are a little tight, but I can always make that adjustment later. I'm honestly so shocked that this fits me so well, and it was made from only 9 measurements. So I will have to make some adjustments to the original pattern that I drew to accommodate for these darts being too tall. But if you guys want a step-by-step tutorial on how to make a bodice that fits your body, let me know in the comments below and I will make one. But since this actually fits me pretty well and I don't really want to redraft and build another one of these right now, I'm actually going to make some modifications to this piece to make the pattern for our mini dress. I have my fabric marker and I'm just going to make a couple of marks while I still have this on me. So first I'm going to identify the center Because this dart is a straight line, I actually want to now make it a curve to accommodate for my bust. So I am just pinching it to where I feel like I can take it in a little bit right underneath my boob, and I'm going to make a mark right there. Now I'm going to figure out where I want it to sit under my underarm, and I think I want it right there, so I'm going to make a mark right there. And then I'm actually just going to follow the line of my bralette that I'm wearing underneath to get that general shape of the top. And don't worry about it being perfect, because we're going to take this off and clean these lines up later. Since I am going to be making this top from the blazer, I won't have enough material to make the front piece one large panel. So I'm going to split them into 3 sections, 1, 2, and then 3. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take from this seam right here, I'm going to make a curved line and join it to the top of where the strap is going to be. Now I'm also just going to make a mark to where I want the back to be. Now that I have all of this drawn out, I'm going to take this off, and then we can clean up our lines and figure out our pattern pieces. I'm going to start with the back of the top. Here is the mark that we made to identify the lowest point of the back. It's looking a little bit low to me, so I'm going to raise it up 1 inch and then join it to the mark that we made on the side seam. Moving on to the front, I'm identifying the center front and drawing a vertical line. Now I'm just drawing out the new neckline inspired by the Paris, Georgia top. To create this new curved line, I fold my piece along the bust seam and lay it as flat as possible. Then I draft a curved line using the guide marks that I previously made. Repeat this step on the other side of that same bust seam. Now cut out your new pattern pieces. Your pieces should look something like this. I've only cut out the pieces for half of the top, with this being the center front line. Because this is very much a trial and error project, I'm actually going to make a mock-up out of this cotton fabric that I already have from the pattern that we just cut out. I just want to make sure that it fits nicely before I start taking the blazer apart. As you can see here, I finished sewing up the mock-up for the top, and I have safety pinned this side seam shut so that I can make any necessary adjustments. As you can tell, it is gaping a little bit on the side here, but I think that if I just take it in from the back about 1 inch, that should fix the problem. Now that we're done with the pattern for the top, we can move on to the worst part of the tutorial, which is seam ripping this jacket. I've just finished seam ripping the entire blazer apart, and I wanted to show you guys the shoulder pads that were in this thing. Look how freaking huge they are. It's literally bigger than my face, and I have a really big face, so woof. Now that that's done, I'm gonna take the pattern pieces from the mock-up that we made, I'm gonna map it out on the blazer, and then I'm gonna cut out the pieces I need. I lay all my pieces from the blazer out on the floor as I slowly try to figure out this pattern puzzle. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but it ended up being so much more challenging than I ever anticipated, and I'm slightly ashamed to admit how much time I actually spent trying to figure this out. So I've kind of just wasted a lot of time moving pieces around trying to figure out what I needed to cut out from the blazer, because the pattern on this blazer fabric is on a grid, so I'm nervous that if I don't cut out my pieces nicely and they don't line up, it's just gonna look really, really bad. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually going to cut out the pieces that I need for my skirt out of this cotton fabric so that I can then actually map it out on the blazer and cut out the pieces that I want. Because I want the seams for my top and my skirt to line up nicely, the way that I'm gonna draft this skirt pattern is slightly complicated, but if you don't really mind your seams not lining up, or if you didn't pick a fabric that has a pattern on it that also needs to line up, then you can just trace out the shape of a skirt that you know fits you well. But because I know that my OCD is really gonna bother me if the seams don't line up, I'm going to use this slightly more complicated way. The easiest way for me to draft a skirt pattern is to just copy the shape of a skirt that I know fits me well, but because I want the seams for the top to line up with the seams from the skirt, I'm actually gonna take a few additional steps while tracing out my pattern so that I know that all my seams are gonna line up nicely. I start by drawing the waistline. Then I place a skirt I know fits me well along that waistline, and I trace out the curved side seam. Since it's a mini dress, I'm only going to be tracing the side till this point. Now using the side front pattern piece of the top, I identify the width I need this panel to be. Then I draw a perpendicular line from the waist all the way to the hem, making sure I add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now draw your hemline. Here I'm adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the side seam. Now draw another line to accommodate for the 1/2 inch seam allowance for the next panel. Using the center front pattern of the top, I identify the width I need for this panel of the skirt. From this point, draw a line from the waist to the hem and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Extend your hemline. I cut out my pattern pieces and then I also cut out 2 mirrored pieces. This is what the pieces for the front of your skirt should look like now, and I'm just making sure that they line up with my top pieces. To draft the pattern for the back of my skirt, I'm going to repeat these steps with a few minor adjustments. Using the pattern that we cut out for the front of the skirt, I'm tracing out the side seam and the hemline. I forgot to draw out my seam allowance for the side seam here, so make sure to do that. Using the back side pattern piece of the top, I identify how wide I need this panel to be and draw a line from the waist to the hem. From this point, I measure 1/2 inch and make a mark. Then I draw a diagonal line connecting these 2 points. Then I draw another line to account for my 1/2 inch seam allowance. For your next panel, draw a perpendicular line from your waist and add your 1/2 inch seam allowance. Using the center back pattern piece of your top, identify the width and draw a perpendicular line to the hem. Once again, I'm adding 1/2 inch to the point on the hem and drawing a diagonal line to connect these 2 points. Draw another line for your 1/2 inch seam allowance. When we sew our skirt together, we'll actually be sewing these 2 diagonal lines to create a seam. Cut out your pattern pieces. Now we're just going to flip this piece over so that the 2 diagonal lines will be next to each other. Cut out 2 mirrored pieces and you should have something that looks like this. So I actually had to step away from this project yesterday because I was getting so frustrated and I was basically just convincing myself to just abandon this project entirely. But once I had all those pattern pieces cut out, it did make things significantly easier because I got to lay everything out and then I could see exactly what pieces I needed. Now that I finally cut out all the pieces that I need, I wanted to show you guys that I also ironed on some interfacing to my fabric. This just gives it a little bit of structure so I won't have to line my dress and I don't have to wear a bra. I've gone ahead and sewn the top together, and while it's not perfect, I'm actually pretty happy with how the pattern turned out. Now I'm gonna sew my skirt pieces and then we can start putting the dress together. I've pinned my completed skirt and completed top along the waistline, making sure that every single one of these seams line up. Guys, I just finished sewing the dress together and it looks so good. Every single one of these sexy seams line up like they're supposed to, so I'm so happy about it. I've also went ahead and inserted the invisible zipper on the left side, so now let's move on to hemming. As you can see here, I've used bias tape to bind the raw edges of the center part of the top, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the hem. So normally there's a really specific way of sewing bias tape, but because I'm going for this more exposed look, I won't be using the regular method. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to sandwich the raw edge in between the folded edge of the bias tape and sew to secure. Just in case that made no sense to anyone but me, here is a visual. So I'm just unfolding my bias tape, sandwiching my hem in between it, and then sewing to secure. Now that I finished hemming the skirt, we're gonna use the same method and we're going to bind the rest of the exposed edges on the top. So we'll start from this point and we'll work our way all the way around the back of the top, ending on this point. I'm also going to be leaving about 15 inches of excess bias tape at the beginning of this point because this will end up being the strap. I've attached the bias tape to the rest of the top and now I'm just figuring out how long I want my straps to be. Sew them down and we're all done. That was my tutorial on how I turned a blazer into a mini dress. If you guys want to see more pictures from this upcycle, make sure to follow me on Instagram. If you guys liked this video, please subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and comment down below. I'll see you guys in the next video, and as always, thank you so much for watching.